Cool. Well, I'm excited to have you here, Tariq, and I appreciate. It got a little crazy last week with everything, but I'm glad we could work it out, man.
Yeah, likewise. I'm glad to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we start like kind of at the beginning? I mean, I know a little bit about you. I've read your bio, but um, what are you doing right now, and how did it get started?
So I'm kind of my main focus right now is running Roomy,
Yeah.
and that is, we are actually structured. We're a tech startup, but we're structured with a 501c3 nonprofit status because we have a
Oh wow.
Wikipedia-like model. Yeah, we have models kind of like Wikipedia, where we have a community we're growing that's creating lots and lots of great free micro learning content. Micro learning is all about sort of learning in 5-minute bursts, with short lessons on your phone, all mobile first. And we've been growing it, really, really through the pandemic in particular. Is right when we launched it, and it showed a lot of traction. And that seems to be replacing social media actually for a lot of younger people, and allowing them to get a dopamine rush from kind of learning new skills and job life and career skills and things that they kind of say is we didn't learn in high school, but we wish we had.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always thought that was funny. Like, they didn't teach us taxes in high school, but I got my accounting degree, and my couple of tax classes were extremely boring. I mean, useful, obviously, but man, I couldn't
Honestly,
imagine.
yeah, I bet everybody in class was asking you for the everyone's asking you for the answers, right? Because at some point, no one wants to do that stuff, and even the people who study it find it boring. So
Yeah, it's like, oh,
it's
geez,
tough.
man, I don't know if I would have even paid it, but I think that's great because one thing that's always been on my mind that I think is cool with Rumi is how I'm just waiting for a big disruptor in the education space because it's got to come. Like because I just don't
Yeah.
see I don't see brick and mortar like sit in a class for 8 hours a day, go to 4 years of college, and not get anything like no experience, or anything like that. You know what I mean? I just don't see that lasting very long.
Yeah, it's got to change. The one thing that's really fascinating about education that I think everybody learned in the pandemic is the difference between giving people, learners in particular, students or
Mhm.
learners, the difference between giving them what they need versus what they want and need. So if you
Mm.
think of it this way, the traditional model is you have a classroom and it's a captive environment, and you've got, people sitting there for an hour for a lecture, and you're giving them all the stuff that they need, right? Because there's a curriculum and you're saying, here are the main things you're learning. There's a lot of questions around whether the curriculum really covers the stuff you need. Like, like we're just saying, how's it possible you graduate and you don't know how a mortgage works, or how, the credit card debt works? You know what I mean? Like, these are the most
Yeah.
important financial decisions you make. But even leaving that aside, imagine the curriculum is right. They're creating the learning experience by saying, here's what you need, and we're just going to drill it into your head. And they rely on the fact that they have a captive audience there. For 60 minutes as a lecture, if you or I are sitting in the class, we can't just jump out the window if it's really, it's really boring, right? After like 10 minutes, like we're kind of stuck there. And
Oh,
what's really
true.
fascinating, well, what's interesting is that, so in the pandemic, people realize that you can't just digitize an in-person experience, right? Because if you just take that experience and you just digitize it, you end up with a 60-minute video, and then you ask some kid who's sitting in their bedroom at home because their school is closed or whatever, that, hey, why don't you sit and watch this 60-minute video? It's not the same thing anymore, because that kid has 100 other things they can do, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They're getting TikTok notifications, they're getting Instagram notifications. So you know what I mean? Like, if you're 10 minutes into that and you're like, this is boring, like I don't want to deal with this. You can't get out of the
Yeah.
classroom, but in this, the notification pops up, you press the button, and next thing you know, you're watching a fun TikTok video. And so that's why our big focus is it can't just be what you need. People need, they have to also want it, right? It has
Yeah.
to be engaging, it has to be fun, it has to be the kind of thing that someone who has a choice and is sitting at home and using technology independently
Mhm.
and is not a captive audience, has to actually want to use, because it's fun and engaging. And that's kind of our core focus.
Yeah. So what are kinds of things that you focus on in this micro learning kind of micro education app?
So one of the things that we focus a lot on is getting content areas that meet the needs of learners. And so we're growing this community on Discord and elsewhere, and we just listen. You know, we're very much bottoms up, and we say, listen, like, tell us the sorts of things that you're interested in learning. And of course, we have guardrails around that, right? So you can't just go
Yeah.
anywhere. But there's a wide range of things that are, you know, they're topical and quick moving. So like we have micro courses or what we call bites on like what is an NFT, you know, the
Wow.
benefits of taking handwritten notes. It turns out there's all these cognitive benefits and you remember stuff better. You know, a lot of things that that people want to understand, but there's no way the educational system, which moves so slowly, is ever going to keep on top of them. And so we kind of focus on those content areas that people care about. And you know, in the last year, for example, mental health content has been a huge area. Of
I can
course,
only
you know, it's
imagine.
a pandemic, right? People feel isolated. And then we just focus on making it an enjoyable experience because we know that you can teach people better if you make it engaging and exciting. And like that's things like, you know, having animated GIFs or memes or other kind of fun things that are incorporated throughout. So it keeps people scrolling, it keeps people engaged, it's enjoyable, and they get to learn at the same time.
Yeah, I heard a statistic when I was working with a videographer once. I was having a conversation with him, and he was talking about courses like oh, you know, it was like some crazy like short amount of time in between each graphic. Like a video course has to have, you know, a graphic every 18 or 20 seconds for it to like stay engaging, you know, because like you said, it's like
Yeah,
I don't have to stay here and you know, you're not right there. So if I leave, I'm not going to offend anybody. Yeah, it's like that captive audience. I really like how you brought that up because it's true. Like if you don't have a captive audience, is it really worth it for me to
that's
stay?
exactly it. I mean, that's exactly it. People have a choice, right? And so, you know, if you don't keep them engaged, they're going to leave. And there's two ways to view that, right? There's, you know, you have a lot of education purists and they'll say, well, you know, they'll see that people are using TikTok more, they have shorter attention spans, they're kind of, you know, they want that thing to hit. And so they're not going to sit and wait for a long time. And they get upset about it and they say, this is not the way the world should be. And people should have longer attention spans and, you know, yada, yada, yada. You know, look, I mean, there's some good points they make in there, but our goal is to create impact, right? Our goal is to
Yeah,
build a
yeah.
movement that really helps people. So we just have to deal with the reality, and the reality is that whether we like it or not, you know, people, including myself, right? I use social media, right? I'm not going to say I don't, but like I'm trained into having, you know, a shorter attention span a bit and looking for that, you know, that constant engagement. Otherwise, I close, you know, apps also if they're not, you know, fun, and I switch to social media without even realizing it sometimes.
Oh, for sure. I think all of us get in that kind of, you know, I'll move to the next thing, move to the next thing. But I think it's important that you're kind of changing with that, right? Because you know, one of the things that I did learn in like my time in like college and stuff, and since I've, you know, I like to teach and I like to, I mean, specifically, I like to teach, like I like to, you know, help people. And one of the big things is like if you can't fit it in 5 minutes, you don't really know the subject. You know what I mean? If you can't get it in snackable bites anyway, like do you really know what you're talking about? I think one of the things that really kind of grinds my gears is like especially in like the education space is like people romanticize like hard like you could never teach somebody about NFTs in 5 minutes. Why? Maybe not like all the nitty gritty stuff, but most of us don't care about the nitty gritty. Most of us just want to know. And yeah, you can.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. There's this sort of almost fetishization. It's almost like a protectionist thing, where it's like, I know this thing, and I'm so proud that I know this thing that I want to make it seem like a really impressive thing to know, right? That no one else knows. Kind of like me saying I can dunk a basketball, and that sounds awesome until someone looks at the net and it's 6 feet off the ground. You realize everyone can dunk it, right? So it's kind of like one of those things where, you know, you want to people want to elevate it and all. And the reality is, I think it was might have been Einstein or a lot of sort of the most intelligent folks in society throughout history have made this point that exactly what you said, right? Is that to truly know something, you know, you need to be able to translate it into terms that meet the audience, right? Meet the
Mm,
audience where they are. And so I used to have an old boss when I first started working. He used to say to me, he said, listen, explain it to me like I'm an 8-year old. This guy was super intelligent, right? But he knew that, you know, people get stuck in all these areas, the peripheral areas, the corners, the weeds. and he wanted to know a quick and simple understanding of what the big pieces are, and he wanted to know also that the people who worked for him knew the stuff well enough that they could like kind of translate and repackage it however needed, right? And that was a true mark of like comprehension.
Right. I think another, yeah, a way to comprehension and like how the world works. I read a tweet that went viral that was like, that said, like, professor, write an 8-page paper. Me pitching an investor, you've got 60 seconds. Right.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
I'm like, what the
Exactly, right?
heck?
People, I know. It's like people will swipe off. I'll tell you a funny story about attention spans.
Yeah.
On TikTok, we were doing a video for Rumi. It was trying to promote something, and we were hiring someone, and we do a lot of stuff around helping people get a job, right? Even pioneer something called TikTok CVs, which is like a supplemental thing where you
Oh,
can get
cool.
to express yourself. So some cool stuff in there. And so we have a couple people on the team who know TikTok really well. It's not something that I would call myself an expert in. And so I shot a short video, and one of the people on the team, she's saying, listen, can you just speak a bit faster when you say it? And so I did it like 3 or 4 times. She kept saying the same thing. In the end, I saw the video that we actually posted, and she just like used some software to speed it up. And it's funny because I'd been always taught that for public speaking, you want to go out there and speak slowly. So I would say, hey, my name is Tariq Fancy, and I am the founder of Rumi or something. In reality, in TikTok world, what my own team members knew better than I did was that like if I speak at that speed, like within 2 seconds, someone's swiping off. You know what I mean? It's like, hi, my name is boop, and the finger comes and they just swipe to the next video. And so they had actually sped it up to point it sounded like I was on crack. I was like, hey, I'm Tariq Fancy. How are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And it's it just kept people linked into it. Otherwise, the algorithm is just like people would say, oh, forget it.
Yeah, people just go past it. It's true though. I think TikTok just updated, like I think you can do 3 minutes now, but before it was 60 seconds. Right?
Yeah.
And it was like
It challenges you to get a lot in there. It's like tweeting in some sense, right? I'm not a huge fan of Twitter, but it's like, it does force you to like be quite, succinct in whatever you're saying.
Well, I think that's interesting because one of the biggest lessons I had to learn in sales and in like marketing copy and all these things is like, keep it short and sweet. Like you're right, like, and then I realized like I found myself doing that. Like, I don't want to sit here and listen to that. Like, I need you to give me the 60 seconds and I'll tell you if I like it or not. You know what I mean? So it really challenges you, but it's also a really good thing. I feel like we're going that. But let me ask you, like, what made you start Rumi? Like, take us back to the beginning. What were you doing before Rumi? Are you trying to be like an education disruptor, or like what's going on?
So I got to Rumi in a sort of roundabout way. I had this deep passion around doing something with social impact. Like I wanted to do something that I was proud of and that I felt was contributing to the world. And I was always passionate about education because my parents grew up in Kenya and my grandparents. And, I've visited and seen the inequalities, right? And how fortunate we would be in North America to get access to, to realize our potential through education. And so I was always interested in it. And what really pushed me over the edge, I had a very close friend from business school who, he and I both wanted to do social impact stuff someday. And, we just kind of went back to finance because that's where I'd spent over 10 years of my career in investment banking and investing. And he and I would both say we're gonna do something good for the world. And then we never really got around to it. And then one day he was suddenly diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And that was, it's really tough. It was like, just came out of nowhere. And, in that situation, it wasn't even like I'm going to do something someday. It was, a now or never thing. And so he created a charity doing work in Kenya, actually, which was amazing. He was a, blonde haired, blue eyed guy from Holland. And he was, out there, it's really what gave him meaning. And so that pushed me off the edge of the diving board to do Rumi. And it, throughout our whole view was always that we want to listen to the learner. We want to listen to the person using it and not be top down and say, oh, we have this perfect theory and you need to take this thing because we've, figured it out. We said, listen, the only way we're going to create impact is if we listen to the people and see what they want. And then we'll figure out how to merge that with what they need, right? The key educational things. And you get something that, has the potential that we're now seeing where it's skyrocketing and people are, really kind of adopting it quickly.
Yeah, that's great. I like that you said listen to the learner. I like that, that's a crazy story. I mean, that's a really powerful story. One of the reasons I love doing this podcast is because I feel like most people like the origin story. You know what I mean? Like we like the intention and the obstacle, and how we overcame this stuff, and worked through it, and that's a great story. But I mean, it's probably one of the most important, though. I think education is what really frees people, especially. I mean,
Yep.
I feel like that's one of the things that I benefited. I because going through college, like when I was going through college, like it was huge. I mean, there were like you were either like, it was almost like you were either pro college, like pro institutional colleges, or like a college basher. Like there was nothing in between. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
and for me it was like, no, I want to go to college because I feel like I have that opportunity. You know what I mean? And for me it was a personal decision. Like I don't even use my accounting degree. Like I know all the things. I ran a tax business firm for a little bit, and I mean I keep up to date on all my knowledge, but like for it was just for me. But eventually, but one of the things I started with was why wouldn't we go to school and learn something? You know what I mean? Like it's right here. Like
Yeah.
some people don't get this.
Absolutely. I mean, we're spoiled in the sense that we even have access, right? Because
Right.
there are all these studies showing that there's like girls in Rwanda who are as capable as we are, but their math and reading scores, or their level of knowledge literacy, are just significantly below because they've never
Yeah.
received access. And even now, you see that kind of like your example, we're evolving ourselves to a version of the world that is less structured, where it's like, oh, I need to be in this classroom, or I need to be in this university degree, and it's like, there's stuff like what we're doing, which is supplemental, right? And it's
Mhm.
it fills in key areas that people want and need and are not getting
Mhm.
in the traditional system. And I think as a lot of the learning goes more online, and it becomes a bit more learner centric, where it's driven by the curiosity of the learner and what they're passionate about, and it sort of adapts and gives them more of that, more than just like a really structured curriculum only, where it's like everybody must do X, Y, and Z. I think you'll get to a place where hopefully more people will see themselves um, through the educational system, advancing in a way that they're really interested in themselves, right? Like it's not like you wouldn't be just doing a degree because it's for the sake of it. You might actually find that you start to find and learn and evolve in a direction that you're really passionate about and that you want to learn. And I think that's the beauty of education, right? Is tapping into that, because everybody has it, right? Everybody
Mhm.
has it and is intrigued. It's a human, almost like a basic human uh, need, but so often it's not given to people in a way that they can really sort of appreciate, or that like kind of works for them, right? And you see a lot of
Mhm.
people who are super smart and they're super creative, but the education system is super structured and it didn't really work for them.
Yeah, I always felt like I had you know, parts of the education system, specifically when I was growing up, like failed me. Like all of growing up, I really believed that I didn't like reading, but I just didn't like what they were giving me. You know what I'm saying? I'm like,
Yeah.
what the heck? But I have a question, kind of like focusing back, kind of coming back to like Rumi. Um, how do you guys, and this is a question that I ask whenever I interview people in like this education, like disruption or education innovation space, where we're trying to like, come forward, because I think I mean it's, you got places like Udemy, you got places like Coursera, LinkedIn Learning. Like how do you, because one of the reasons like people still feel like they have to go to a 4-year university is because people feel like there's credibility at these places, like they've built up some
Yeah.
kind of credibility. And so how do you combat, or how are you focusing on credibility? Because I'm not saying that you're not like I think knowledge is knowledge, right? But I feel like in order for this totally to shift, we have to figure out this credibility bit.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's always the question of credentials, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah.
a sort of an old argument in the space, is that is the value of getting a degree, is it the what you learn, right? Because you learn a lot of stuff, and that's considered what's called the treatment effect. And then the idea is, well, maybe it's not what you learn, it's just the fact that you walk out with a diploma, right? And then that's considered the signaling effect, right? Because it doesn't really matter what you learned, it's the fact that you
Yeah.
have the diploma lets people realize, oh, you must know a bunch of stuff or be reasonably intelligent or whatever.
Yeah.
And for us, right now, I mean, we're very focused on sort of attracting learners to spend their time on it because they enjoy it. But
Yeah.
the next thing that we're working on and thinking about is exactly the idea of micro credentialing, right? So the
Yeah.
idea being that you can't, credentials that could be a university degree. Obviously, that's a big investment of time and resources and money.
Yeah.
But you can learn a lot before that at the sort of what's called the top of the funnel, right? And 5-minute lessons to even figure out where you want to go next, like where you want to dig deeper, whether it's
Yeah.
Coursera or this or that. And so that's where we tend to specialize at Rumi, right? Is that discovery phase. And so there's room to add credentialing to it, but in many ways it also can be viewed as something that, like, it's less about the actual credential of the badge and more about the discovery and the love of learning and using that to get through the funnel and figure out actually where you want to dig deeper.
That's a great point because I remember having a conversation with my brother-in-law who was trying to figure out what he wanted to do in college. Because I'm like, look, because I tell people like I'm not a college bathroom, and obviously there it is, right? Like, um,
Mm,
but I do tell people like you want to know, you don't want to waste your time. Like you don't want to change your major 18 times because you don't know. So I had that exact conversation with him. I was like, you should go to Udemy or some of these other places, buy like 10 courses for $20 and like all over, like, I want to learn about these 10 things, right? So you go buy them and then you
yeah.
really see if like you want to buy them or not, because like that would be great for people. Like, okay, here's a 5-minute micro course on coding, and it'll give you enough information to see if you like it or not. And if you don't like it, you didn't, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, it's things like that, like a lot of the content that we've been adding, and it's all again response to what people are asking for. It's like
Right.
stuff like, how do I get a job? And at first we were saying sort of like like we were building micro courses on, like, things relating to improving your CV and perfecting it, how to, the subtleties of creating that so you create the best impression, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of there's a lot of really good, simple tricks that people don't use because I guess they don't know them. Um, but there's stuff like, how do you uh, improve your CV, how do you interview. And what's interesting is a lot of the stuff that's really catching on is like, what should I even do? So the idea is, like, to your point on coding, it's like you do 5 minutes and you learn just enough, and then you could do a few other ones, and that way you kind of like you could sort of taste the beginning, right? The discovery
Yeah.
phase of, like, because again, you could learn coding online in a whole bunch of places free online, but
Yeah.
the completion rates are really low, right? People sign up and then they're sort of like a little bit into it and they're like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And it's hard to know if you want to, like, finish an 18-hour course if you don't really know enough about anything, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, I'm totally agreeing with you. You said that it's kind of shifting to like people are asking like what should I do? But you mentioned like interviews and resumes. Um I've always had kind of a similar, the way I feel about education is the way I feel about kind of like resumes and interviewing. Although I don't really I haven't met somebody who's kind of disrupting that space yet. But like I've been in sales my whole life, and I just feel like resumes and maybe not interviewing, but like resumes are kind of going away because I don't know, do they really matter that much, or like what are your kind of things on like resumes? What do you think the future of resumes are?
that's a really good question. I think that they will eventually change in form, but I think something like that will have to exist. And so,
Sure.
the way we think about it is that, like, you can, if the game requires you today to have a resume, and it doesn't if you're starting your own business or you're maybe
Sure.
doing something startup oriented or you meet people through your network. So sometimes it doesn't, but usually you still have to. Then
Yeah.
people just have to play that game. And so it's a little bit about saying, how can we find ways to help people improve them, right? Like, it's better if you have numbers in your resume. It's better if you use certain words and describe certain things in certain ways.
Yeah.
You know, even the most bland background can have a great looking CV if you go through all the tips and you use the best practices.
Right.
But you know, I think you're right. Like that form is probably going to change, right? That's kind of why we were thinking, like the TikTok CV thing I was talking about. You know, it's something we started doing, and it's a cool idea because it doesn't replace a resume, right? I mean, the whole thought of a TikTok CV will scare someone, especially as the older they are, right? They'll say, "Oh my goodness, what's going on?" But the truth is, it's just a way to add to your resume, and
Hmm.
you know, you almost supplement it, and you get to show a little bit of your personality, and it's you know, it's natural and normal for a certain generation that have grown up doing this all the time.
Yeah. So explain to people who don't know what a TikTok resume is, like, what is it and how did they use it?
I mean, the simplest thing is that it's a 60-second, like, or it's a TikTok video that
Hmm.
adds on to your existing resume, and it allows you to bring it to life, show a personal narrative, right? Show a bit of your personality in a way that doesn't come out in just, you know, a CV. And, you know, the name of the game these days is you got to stand out, right? Because it's a pile of 100 CVs. You want yours to be good, but you also want yours to stand out. And so if you have something like that, you know, it's just an extra edge, you know, that helps you express yourself to people and show creativity. But for many roles, it actually is very, very applicable, right? Because you get a chance
Yeah.
to show someone a bit of your work, and you know how you present and so on and so forth.
Yeah, especially, well, I remember in 2020, I was one of the ones that had to look for a job, and it was all about cold emailing and these 60-second videos. And it was hard because, like, if you took like a traditional class in college would be like, you know, don't put your picture on the thing, or like don't include a lot of, you know what I mean? You want to try to remove
Mhm.
bias from your resume
Right.
almost. And I'm like,
Right.
why though? I want you to be biased. Like, if you like
Yeah.
me, you know what I mean? But like, not in a bad, I'm not talking about like a discriminatory way, right? But I'm saying
Of
like,
course. Yeah.
I have a personality. Like, that's why you buy me. That's why people buy stuff from me, is because like you know what I
Totally.
mean? I'm Dalton. And same thing with
Yeah.
you, I'm
Exactly.
sure.
Well, you know, that's really it, right? Because you know, I understand the goal to sort of remove bias, but it's one of those things where it's like, you know, you also want people to be able to express who they are as an individual, because that's the point of the interview anyway, right? You're eventually going to get to an
Right.
interview, and what you want to do is kind of stand out, you know, and stand out in a way that gets you to that interview stage.
Hmm. Yeah, and that comes with like your personality. I remember interviewing at an accounting firm where like, I got the job not really because like I was better than anybody, but because like when I got in there, I just had this weird background of like, you got a sales guy who has like 10 years of sales experience, and now he wants to be like a staff accountant. You know what I mean? And like my
Yeah.
whole sales thing was like, yeah, but I can talk like, but I'm like, I'm not just a staff accountant. I'm like your liaison, because where's all the friction in an accounting part? Well, it's with sales because they don't understand, and we don't understand them. And so it was like I didn't really know anything more than anybody. Like I wasn't exceptionally qualified, but like it was me. Like that's what you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
I love
absolutely. I
I
mean,
love
that's
TikTok
so big, right?
resumes.
It's fit. I know.
Yeah.
Same here. I'm not great at TikTok, but you know, I mean, there's a lot of people who are and who can benefit from, you know, trying creative angles like that.
But just like a 60-second video, like I like the branding of like TikTok, right? Because it kind of like makes people think and like, but just a 60-second video, I think that's like incredible. And so you're seeing, so what you listen to learners. You mentioned it's kind of switching to like, what do I like, what do I want to do? But are there any specific things that people are like wanting to learn, like requesting to learn about, or?
Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, the areas that have been popular and have grown a lot are around, you know, mental health, around financial literacy, around getting a job. The areas that I think, you know, we honestly, the tagline we now use, because it's what people tell us, is exactly, you know, it's the things that you wish you learned in school but didn't, right?
Yeah.
But they're important things to know. And you either didn't learn it because they didn't cover it, like financial literacy, which is a shame,
Yeah.
or it's just not covered well, or it's out of date. So again, you're not going to learn in the school system how like I don't know, cryptocurrencies work, or, sort
Yeah.
of like a
Yeah.
lot of sort of more cutting edge things. And so we're able to kind of, I mean, in one sense, we have a real benefit is because our charity status and mission. So we're kind of, 501c3. It's charity.
Uh-huh.
It's structured like Wikipedia, but that status and mission ensures that we'll never sell people's data or use it in
Oh.
any way other than to empower them to learn, right? And so it's interesting because a lot of other companies, we live in a world where the opposite is the expectation, right? You have people, they're trying to suck your data out, and they're trying to use it to like keep you on the platform to sell ads, or they're trying to sell you more stuff. And so
Yeah.
we're taking that data and then we're using it to sort of figure out, well, what's better for you, and that tends to guide then where we go with how the content is structured, what are the areas we want, where are the areas that
Yeah.
are popular. So all we're doing is saying, let's use all the information and the data we're getting, and it's like, how do we use that to bring value to the learner? And it's through creating content that they want, that's valuable, that there's more of it, and so they're able to continue their sort of that quest, right? It's a learner-centric quest that's driven by the learner's curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, but then it becomes more meaningful, right? Like if you are involved in making the plan, you have ownership over the plan. And now if something messes up, like it's not like, oh, they made me do this and they suck at teaching me. It's like, well, no, I contributed to this and so I'm going to make this work. It's like you're putting ownership of learning back into the hands of like students. And I think
Yeah.
that's more important, right? And back to like some of these things like what school never taught me. I used to be like I used to get really irritated. Like, why didn't you teach us about this? Like, dude, I don't need to balance a checkbook. I have like an app on my phone that literally does it for me in real time. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's like, but I just don't think like they knew. Like, I don't think the teachers knew. Like, the credit cards were new back then. Like, most of those teachers were getting into credit card debt. They were just like, oh, we don't know about this because it's the first credit card ever invented or
Yeah.
whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to teach something if you didn't learn it yourself in the first place, right? And it's hard to
Yeah.
understand that you need to teach people, right? And so you add those
Mhm.
up with the fact that the education systems in most states they move really slow, right? They're just very
Really
risk
slow.
averse, and
Yeah.
they have like a curriculum committee and all these things. And so, if in the next year or two everyone realizes you need to do, you need to start learning about, this or that area, it's not clear that they can ever react fast enough. And that leaves a large void where people now can, use an internet
Yeah.
connection and search and find that information on their own. And then the question is, where are you getting it from, and is it quality or not?
Yeah. And that's like that's the whole credibility discussion is like, where did, does what you learn actually benefit whatever you know what I mean? Other people.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, it's did you learn something that benefited, and then how do you prove it? Like social proof, right? But one of the other things I think is tough for like schools is like for you guys, I mean, you're like, oh, we're learning about this new thing. We should just throw it up there and it's like done is better than perfect, right? But schools have like this weird, like it's got to be perfect and like, which is very strange, because like schools don't care. There's no ROI for schools. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, if we teach this wrong, then we're not going to get paid. Like schools don't have to go through that, right?
Yeah, it's a tough. You're right. It's a tough one. I think often what happens is that the school systems, like, they're kind of governed by committees and other people who have deep educational backgrounds,
Mm,
and they have a PhD in education from this or that place, and sometimes that can be helpful because they understand it well enough that they can adapt, right, to a
yeah,
new reality, which is, hey, by the way, like, suddenly every single young person in your class has a smartphone and they're like addicted to it. And teachers didn't understand that some years ago. Now suddenly they're like, how do I deal with this? And
yeah,
it creates a lot of opportunities. But then the problem is that often they're very slow to exploit them, because even if an individual teacher wants to do it, like, they can come and work with us and they can bring micro learning for free to their classrooms. But to get the entire school district or the state to do it, doesn't matter how good it is, you're going to be waiting years, right? Because it's just, they just don't move very fast.
yeah. Which is, I mean, I don't get it. it's just it's just weird. You know what I mean? It's like I don't understand, but it,
It's
you
really
know,
unfortunate. Yeah.
yeah, it is what it is. So besides Rumi, what else do you have going on, or is that your main focus? That's your all in, all chips are down on that one.
Well, I mean, I'm that's where I spend my focus daily, right? Because what happened was I founded it. I left finance in 2013. I founded Rumi. We grew it to doing stuff around the world. We were in the, actually started out doing a lot of poor countries and places where they had very little, because we knew that, you can prove it out in a place like that, and they don't have an
Hmm.
alternative, and you've suddenly given them something that's like massively superior. It's technology based, but it works offline, and a bunch of
Yeah.
things that make it easy. Um, and then if we grew it, I ended up stepping back for a couple of years, and I went back to finance for a period. And so I joined BlackRock, which is the world's largest asset management firm. They have
Hmm.
9.5 trillion under management. That's trillion with a T. So very, very large. And I joined them for a couple of years to be their chief investment officer for sustainable investing. So
Oh
sustainable
wow.
investing is people call, yeah,
Yeah.
impact investing or ethical investing or responsible investing, or there's a new acronym, ESG, right? Environmental, social, and corporate governance,
So what is that?
factors.
So what is sustainable investing? What's that mean?
It's honestly, it's really just, um, the idea is that you make investments that, unlike the old days where you make an investment only looking for a financial return, and you don't care what you're investing in underneath it. You're not concerned with the ethics or anything else. You're just trying to, make as much
Yeah, you're
money
just
as you
gonna return.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is not a bad thing, because you're often people are legally obligated to do that and so on. But the idea then is, that you could basically invest and get a good return and make the world a better place at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And
So
that's
like
it's
maybe
sort of a double bottom line.
you're not investing in, I don't know, if you don't like oil, maybe you're not investing in oil or something like that. Maybe you're investing in like
Yeah.
Tesla or so. I don't know. I don't know. But you kind of the idea.
Exactly. It's stuff like that.
Okay.
Exactly. It's stuff that is, doesn't you don't want to be investing in the companies that are underpaying their workers, destroying and polluting the
Sure.
environment,
Sure.
basically harming all of us, harming the public interest. You want to invest in the ones that are the good companies. But here's the funny thing about all that stuff. The second thing I've been doing on the side is that basically calling BS on all that stuff, because having, being in a central position at what's the largest asset manager in the world, it's kind of like a vantage point over capitalism, right? It's like a microcosm of capitalism all within one firm. I came to the conclusion that, that really, the only bottom line that was benefiting was the firms that were selling all these brand new products, these green funds. Because
Yeah.
if you look underneath the hood, the financial mechanics of all that stuff, you realize that actually, no, the world isn't changing. No impact is being created. All they're doing is kind of moving around, is moving around money and moving around shares in the markets that are already traded, and then they're finding ways
Yeah.
to repackage it and sell it for higher fees.
Yeah. I was gonna say one of my favorite subjects to read on is like talk about talk about slow. One of my favorite subjects to read on is like the financial crisis of '08. Some of the things like Enron, I like to learn about that kind of stuff. And so like it's
Yeah.
just that's it's just crazy because yeah, I think you're right. Like you said your other thing was exposing that stuff.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much is, it's
Like
interesting. It's kind of like it's linked to Rumi in the sense that Rumi is about making learning easy and fun. And
yeah,
so we're actually have a few micro courses, and we're starting to grow that out on helping people understand how the economic system works. And
yeah,
it's important precisely because if people don't know the details of how it works, at a personal level, it's kind of like if I don't have financial literacy at a personal level, how am I going to decide to buy a house or take
hmm
on debt or make
hmm
big budgeting and financial decisions? But at a societal level, it's also important for people to understand at least some basics around how economics and finance works. Otherwise, you end up in a situation where, you know, Wall Street is able to sell a bunch of products that are, frankly, it's all marketing and spin for the most
yeah,
part, right?
like credit default
Very,
swaps or
yeah, these things that are kind of like confusing and and
yeah,
difficult to understand. And the challenge is that if people aren't empowered with the knowledge to understand how the system works and how the pieces work, they'll get roped in, they'll get kind of duped into like buying these funds or believing Wall Street's doing this or that. And the truth is, what I realized, and it's exactly like the financial crisis, is that the only way to make sure that what Wall Street's doing is serving the public interest, is serving all of us, is regulation, right? I'm not like a big fan of like the government coming in and putting rules everywhere, but like it's kind of like
But
a
you need
sports game,
some.
right? At some point,
Yeah.
you need some, right? It's a competitive endeavor. Like think of competitive sports. It's
Yeah.
impossible to have a competitive sport without rules and referees. Competitive markets
Yeah.
are the same. You don't want too many referees or too many rules. You want to let the
Yeah.
game happen. But at some point when people are playing dirty and they're punching each other in the face and the game just evolves. And that's kind of what's happened with capitalism, right? Is like companies are polluting and they're underpaying workers and they're doing a whole bunch of things that are frankly making people lose faith in capitalism, unfortunately. You need an answer, and I think the system needs to be fixed, but it hasn't been yet, and unfortunately, it hasn't really been fixed after the financial crisis either, right? We're
Right. Well,
still
yeah. I mean, it's kind of
awaiting.
scary. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, yeah. I mean, what happened a couple Mondays ago? I mean, I think Monday. What I think the U.S. hit the ceiling, the debt ceiling, right? And so now we're trying to figure out what to do.
yeah,
But it's just crazy because you're right. I like what you said because I was, I think one of my favorite other, it actually went viral on TikTok, but this guy, he was like, it just showed his face, and then he was like, it just showed his face, and he was like, why I'm not, when people ask me why I'm not Democrat or Republican, and then it panned to like his bookshelf. and
yeah,
I was like, dude, that's true. Like when you start learning about these things, you really find out that like the truth is in the middle, because that's what happened with me. It was like I used to be like, I used to have certain viewpoints, but I really like what you explained there, that it's, you need some rules. It's like sports wouldn't be fun if we could do whatever if we could change the rules in the middle of the
yeah,
game.
exactly. And there's this
Some
weird.
oversight.
No, you're absolutely right. Like, there's this weird idea on that point about rules where people talk about a free market all the time. They keep saying the
Sure.
free market, we should leave it to the free market. And I'm always like, what are you talking about? There is no such thing as a free market, right? Like if you
Okay.
think about you find a lawyer and you ask them, they'll tell you, well, a market is a collection of rules, right? There are rules that govern already today, like can we pollute? There's rules that govern private property, intellectual property rights,
Mm-hmm.
taxes on, fees on different things. And all of those rules exist for a reason, right? Because we want healthy competition, right? That's what capitalism is. Healthy competition to innovate and build the best product. But you want to do it without like lead in your food. You can't have like, baby seats that
Yeah.
blow
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
or, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
poisonous like baby food or whatever. Like someone's got to make sure it's reasonably safe. And that's the key thing, right? There is no such thing free market. There's rules, and those rules need to be updated every so often. And I'd say, unfortunately, the biggest challenge in the U.S. today is that there's a lot of money in politics, right? And when you
Yeah.
have an ability for the most powerful interests that are collecting all the profits to then turn around and use some portion of that to block the system from getting changed, which of course is what they would want to do because they want to protect their profit stream, then you
Yeah.
end up with a system that doesn't really seem to like adapt to the realities and the needs of the public in a meaningful way. And then you get a lot of anti-establishment pushback, you get political upheaval, and a whole bunch of things that
Yeah.
I hope we can fix it right before
It's too late.
the society. Yeah, exactly.
Before it's too late, man.
Society turns.
Before.
Yeah, before we
Yeah.
run out of time.
I like what you said about, defining what a free market is, because you're absolutely right. It's, I think why that resonated so much with me is because like I'm a total sports guy, and it 100% makes sense. Like, yeah, you can't be in the middle of a football game and decide that on fourth down you have 2 yards left, that now actually we're going to change it from 10 yards to 8 yards, and now I have a first down. Like that's
Yeah,
stupid.
exactly.
You can't do that. And and then people, and it's kind of like that's happening. I see that happening everywhere, both sides, all the sides, whatever, where it's like no, and then they hide that excuse behind like, oh well, this is a free market, and it's like, well, no, you just changed the rules, man. It's not a free market. You just decided that
Exactly.
it didn't work for you, so now you're going to change it. That doesn't
Yeah,
make any sense.
exactly. Yeah, the free market argument is always used either by people who they're like, no, 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 leave it to the free market. And they're saying that either because they just like the status quo because it benefits them and they don't want anything getting changed, or in
Mhm.
some way they have some ability to change the rules and frankly rig them in their favor. And so they, the last thing that
Yeah,
you
it's true
want,
though.
it,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's irritating, but no, I appreciate that though, man. I appreciate your time. So how do people like find Roomy, website, stuff to download? Like, go ahead and plug it all, man.
So here's what I'd say. Anyone listening, I would say I'd issue a quick challenge to you, which is to go to rumie.org. It's rumie.org. So it's really easy. Just pull it up on your phone or your computer, whatever you're on, and I challenge people to find something that doesn't pique your curiosity or that you've always wondered about, but you didn't have the time to research, like NFTs or other things,
Mhm.
and see how fast and efficiently you could grasp the contours of that topic, right? In like 5 minutes, and suddenly you know it. You do a couple of short quizzes, and you're done, and it's a fun experience. And if you find one that's really cool like that, the challenge is share it with someone else, right? Because all of what we're doing is open and free. All of the data is used anonymously to bring value back to the public and to the learners, right? To all of
Mhm.
us. And the truth is, it's like we're at the early-ish stages of building what will be the Wikipedia of free microlearning. And within that, I think there's a real opportunity, to grow this. It's less about Rumi as an organization and more of a movement of people doing it because all the content's created by skilled volunteers. And so, there's
Wow.
lots of ways to take part. But we encourage people to say, listen, like join us, right? Come share it. But first and foremost, try it out and see if you. I challenge people to find something they're not interested in because I've done that a few times and no one ever, didn't find something that was cool and shared with someone else.
All right, deal, man. Well, I appreciate it. And I'm glad that I was able to take your time, and we'll we'll chat again, man.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.